Mario has, of course, had a very interesting history over the years. He started out simple, doing nothing but running and jumping, but would still become very popular to the point of becoming one of the original mascots for video games alongside Pac-Man, and would gain a lot more fame than this hockey puck by being on the main game of the hottest product on the market, the Nintendo Entertainment System. But with such a quick rise to fame, no man could remain sane. No man was meant for the spotlight, and as we've seen with celebrities time and time again, fame can bring so much pain to people, forcing them to create intense coping mechanisms, often to their own detriment. They could end up gaining intense alcohol and drug abuse issues, trying to suppress the insanity. They may act out in public in order to release the insanity from their body, or the insanity will come out within their own work, causing them to release some truly puzzling or horrifying products. That last one was the path Mario took, creating some truly weird and out-of-place video games and products. It could have been much worse though. While plenty of these things were not received well, there were some out-of-place Mario games that became beloved classics. However, from a corporate perspective, games like this were ultimately bad for the Mario brand. So, around the N64 era, Big Daddy Miyamoto walked in. He had had enough of his child goofing off in these nonsensical ways. His child was meant to be successful, and these decisions were hurting what he and Mario had built. And while sure, he had a lot going for him now with how naturally gifted he was, such an unfocused boy could never hold the mascot role he was meant to inherit. So Miyamoto knew he had to whip his child into shape. But he was cunning about it. He didn't just suddenly take away all of the stuff his child was doing that he didn't like. That surely would have just caused backlash from Mario, and he would have just become more disobedient. He understood he had to gradually change Mario into the perfect mascot if he wanted to see success. It started as just less bad influences and weird spin-offs, and sticking around more in the Nintendo neighborhood. But as he grew older, steadily, the art style had to stay more consistent. The people he would hang out with in the Nintendo neighborhood also started to narrow. For if he were influenced by the odd fashion of these people, he would surely become distracted from his true goal of becoming a mascot. He also had to show less emotions and present as happy as often as possible. I mean, you can't expect people to care about a depressed person, Mario. Be happy, Mario. Be a man, Mario. Be the Mario that people can look up to in their times of need. Be the mascot Nintendo needs, Mario! And so, Mario, by his father's will, steadily left his old self behind. And by the Wii U, he was a shell of his former self, afraid to open his mouth beyond a simple wahoo, for if he expressed too many emotions, it would break the perfect mascot facade that he thinks he needs. Despite the fact that deep down, he doesn't want this. It was his father that wanted this. But he loves his father and wouldn't want to disappoint him, so he just keeps marching along as the biggest gaming mascot in the world on the outside with a completely empty heart, doing everything to suppress the growing insanity on the inside. It's truly a tragedy, a tale of a man with more success than anyone could ever ask for, and yet he was left imprisoned by it. But we're here to experience that tale. The tale of his blissful life before the prison, the man he had to become within it, and the way the reason he was imprisoned would slowly become the reason he would be released. What? When Mario first got started, he was switching jobs constantly. It was the first thing he did to keep life fresh and keep his mind off of the stress of growing fame. He started as a carpenter, but it wouldn't take long before he was a plumber, a construction worker, a doctor, golfer, tennis player, boxing referee, typing educator, sex educator, and of course, Vietnam War veteran. While some of the other jobs had their weird aspects, the Game & Watch game Mario Bombs Away would be the first time Mario did something completely out of the box in order to cope with his immense fame. He wanted to test the waters of what he could get away with, so why not go completely insane right out the gate? So Mario dressed up in full military uniform in order to show those Vietnamese commies what's what. While this game does technically misrepresent the way bombs were used during the Vietnam War, seeing as no bombs are dropped on innocent people, it's still a very brutal concept for a Mario game. No matter what you do, someone dies in a brutal explosion, whether it's a Vietnamese soldier or Mario. Now you may think I've been exaggerating and just making jokes about how this is all based on the Vietnam War. But I'm just not. This is so clearly based on this massive tragedy. It takes place in a dense jungle with the enemy forces hiding in the trees to attack Mario. The primary weapons used in the Vietnam War were bombs, and the clock function was run by a monkey, an animal that is very common in Vietnam. Nintendo! And I don't know why no one stopped Mario from making this. This couldn't have been meant as some sort of commentary on the conflict, because the Vietnam War had been over for almost a decade when this released. So any attempt to call the Vietnam War bad was too late, and thousands of people already died. However, I'm sure if they did release this sooner, this surely would have stopped the war. If Nintendo released this 10 years earlier, your grandpa would still be alive. So, an Italian plumber underneath a Japanese company just decided to make what is probably the most controversial war that America ever had into a video game, because fuck America. And now we'll forever have artwork of Mario holding a bomb in a military uniform, almost certainly looking at a group of innocent people that he has been ordered to kill by John F. Kennedy. Mario did eventually make it out of the war alive, and while the Game & Watch game itself didn't do amazing, it certainly wasn't a flop by Game & Watch standards, and it gave him the green light to come back and experiment with other various jobs throughout the NES era. But this kind of stuff didn't feel as weird to consumers at the time as it may feel to us now, since at the end of the day, it was just Nintendo using a popular character to help sell a couple video games and products. And companies like Disney did the same thing all the time with Mickey Mouse, with him appearing on all kinds of products. But at least in the dedicated Mickey Mouse cartoons, he was pretty consistent. Even though there were stranger Mickey Mouse cartoons, they were generally few and far between, and they came in far later in his history. It took Mario 2 mainline games to do something that made no sense. Super Mario Bros. 2 featured turnips. And they were onto something. Pretty much everyone knows the history of Mario Bros. 2, but just in case, Mario Bros. 2 was put into development right after Super Mario Bros. It was made to be much more difficult, but Nintendo thought Americans were ass at video games, so they took an easier game they had made called Doki Doki Panic, stuck a red hat on the main character, and released that in the US instead of the original. But because of all that, this game seems so out of place next to every other Mario game. The only thing that makes this game fit in with other Mario games is Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Toad. Everything else is completely original to this game, including... They didn't even reskin the final boss to be Bowser, even though he so easily could have been. It takes place in a completely different dimension called Dreamland of Subcon. Mario is just beckoned into it by a mysterious voice in order to take down the evil frog Wart. Which means the second Mario game ever, at least in the West, did not take place in the Mushroom Kingdom. And while this decision to have Doki Doki Panic replace Mario 2 in the West has been known about for a long time, it has never made sense to me. Yes, the Japanese version of Mario 2 is a terrible game. It's way too hard and unfair in multiple instances. But half of all NES games are unfairly difficult. Just look at Zelda, Ninja Gaiden, Ghosts and Goblins, all beloved NES games that are unfairly difficult. But this is the game that crossed the line. However, it still gave us a very unique Mario game to play, instead of letting Doki Doki Panic probably become forgotten like most NES games. And it still managed to perform very well, despite the very sudden gameplay setting and art style changes. So it proved that Mario could be weird and still have a very successful game. It didn't matter how many turnips there were. Don't eat turnips raw. But this game still drew the eye of his father, Shiggy McGee, who grew concerned for his child. He was happy that this game turned out well, but was still left speculative on Mario's intentions going forward. It's odd that he's been a part of such a weird game so soon, but he still decided to trust his child overall, since it had all worked out so far. This left Mario with a green light to utilize his coping mechanisms of just doing bullshit, and decided to terrify children. Holy shit! It's the severed head of a Japanese micro-celebrity! Ah! All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros. Was a limited run edition of Super Mario Bros. That was released only in Japan, that was given out through a radio show giveaway. The radio show was called All Night Nippon, and it is pretty well known, being broadcasted across multiple radio stations every night in Japan. And in 1986, All Night Nippon and Super Mario Bros. Had a grand idea for a crossover. All Night Nippon ran a sweepstakes in which they would give out special editions of Super Mario Bros. To 2,000 lucky listeners. These Mario cartridges were essentially normal, except with grounds for a creepypasta to be written and go semi-viral in the early to mid-2010s. Many of the sprites in the game were redone to feature the hosts of All Night Nippon instead of the regular Mario enemies and characters. It would also feature a couple random levels from the Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2, so then the creepypasta can end with them talking about secret levels at the end that were harder than any other level in the game. And preteens across the world were left mildly unsettled. The game would feature a couple other minor references to the radio station, but that was it. Now, if there was a special edition of a video game nowadays, but with a popular celebrity instead of the regular characters, I'm sure it would do great. No. Holy shit! Fuck. I hate election years. Because people do just enjoy seeing faces they recognize. So maybe Japanese people did enjoy seeing some celebrities' faces in a video game. Except they don't know these faces. You never see radio host faces. That's like the whole goddamn thing with radio. How is anyone supposed to know who any of these guys are when the only thing anyone would ever recognize from these guys is their voice? And this is before the internet, so you couldn't even look up what the host looked like to figure out who's who. So you just had a game with a bunch of Japanese men that you knew were significant, but you just had to take their word for it that these were them. This simply made no sense and came completely out of nowhere, but it was exactly what Mario wanted. And this was Mario making it clear exactly what he wanted to do with his fame. He was held to no standards of quality except his own and would do as he pleased because he had earned it. This struck fear into Miyamoto. This was utterly insane and had a very high likelihood of causing people to have negative experiences with the Mario brand. So he was starting to no longer be comfortable with being a supportive father. Mario was acting in such short-sighted ways. Surely Mario would be able to see the potential long-term consequences of his actions. While he wanted to say something, Shigimagi would have to move on for now, since Mario hadn't done anything that would cause large-scale damage to the brand. After this, Mario would go on to have other crossovers with celebrities over on the Satellaview, but this was by far the weirdest of all of them. These types of games weren't all celebrities either, and there was even a remake of the original Mario Brothers that was a crossover with a food company that was just Mario Bros, but with food ads before you start playing. This purely corporate product that sacrificed quality in order to make more money gave Mario a unique rush. And so, many Mario products began to be created, and they were of varying quality. Mario was letting so many off-putting products get put out in his own name since he just wanted more weird shit out there. There were many companies that would attempt to get in on the Nintendo fever as fast as possible and get the license to make products that were clearly completely motivated by greed and not by making a high-quality item. And this is by far the most noticeable in the Acme Mario plush. Oh, the moment Mario hits the public domain, we are making a fucked up movie. This true form of terror was created in 1988, smack dab in the middle of the bandwagon that was the NES, and I'm assuming not a single person at Nintendo saw this before it made it to shelves. To be fair, Mario's exact design was not nailed down at this point. But this doesn't even match how Mario is depicted anywhere, including the art on the tag of the toy itself. The shoes are the wrong color, he has no teeth, his overalls droop far too low, his mustache doesn't even match the unique shape of Mario's mustache, he's furry all around, his hat is oddly small, and most importantly, he's bald! Even on the tag of the plush, you can see Mario with a respectable hairline. So why the heck did they take away his hair? I guess it's just a stereotype for plumbers since they're often older men who are probably struggling with the realities of male pattern baldness. Back another millimeter. But that doesn't mean Mario has to suffer too, and Luigi ended up getting dragged down with him with his own plush. And after this, for some reason, Acme was allowed to do this again for Mario Bros. 3. They made a raccoon Mario, which does fix a lot of the problems with the original plush, but he's still scary and furry. Why did they attach so much fur to him? There are materials that you can use for Mario that don't require you to rip all of the fur off of helpless animals. Who's ready to be Mario? Ah! And this is just one of the weird Mario products. There were these terrifying little guys with bad eyelashes, Transformer Mario, who was less than meets the eye because it looks like there is some kind of game to this, and there isn't, an unsettling shower head that probably lost all its color after a couple uses, and so many other things. And the terror of these products would peak at this disgusting Mario alarm clock, which doesn't look super terrifying at first glance. It's not a perfect Mario model, but it's not immediately alarming. But the problem comes when the alarm goes off.
Wake up! It's time to leave Dreamland!
There's a guy! Finally, I can wake up to the feeling of a strange man being in my room. There are so many songs or even sound effects from the Mario series that would have been so much better as an alarm. Instead, they just chose a guy, so you get to wake up feeling like there's an intruder in your room. The reason he sounds like just a guy in this is because this was made before Charles Martinet, may he rest in peace, voiced the character. So, some random guy had to do it. This, along with everything else, was disgusting to Shigimagi. How could this be allowed to continue to happen? Miyamoto thought that his son would get better over time, but it just seemed to be getting worse and worse. Especially with the voices, because it did not stop at the weird merchandise. They started to become a recurring pattern that caused there to be a lot of odd Mario media, including an oddly high amount of TV shows. Most of the TV shows were pretty
You'll be just fine, folks. Really, I promise. No one's gonna die. He's okay. He's fine. I was a total Nintendo kid growing up. I was on an entirely different level. Every other kid was talking Black Ops 2, Halo, boom boom, explosion. I was that freak on elementary school field trips to the zoo, would point to all the fucking animals and shout, "I choose you!" and throw imaginary Pokeballs at the silverback gorilla enclosure. Yeah, I was that kid. But look, the point is I loved Nintendo games. I fucking ate them up. Zelda, Pokemon, Mario, you name it. And with that all said, on one fateful afternoon right after school, my mom took me to a decrepit, rotting blockbuster down the street, and that's when I laid my eyes on this shit. The Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
Do the Mario fling your arms from side to side.
Stop. Okay, look, I'm limited on time here, man. All right, just go. I don't know, find something to do at the laundromat or something. Here, a wacky and zany animated show created by Dick. Based on the Super Mario Brothers for the NES, each episode consists of live-action segments, and the remainder of the show is dedicated to animated stories. What's truly impressive is that Dick only had a handful of Mario games to draw from, yet they managed to craft such a vibrant world that still feels pretty consistent with Mario even today. From its soundtrack and sound effects straight out of the games to its constant use of spaghetti and meatball jokes, that by the end of each episode be sure to have you screaming, "Mamma Mia!" There's not a single dull moment in this quirky and quite campy cartoon. I mean, look at this. Don't know why I showed you that, but I'm glad I did. Some might call it trash, but I call it a masterpiece. A work of art. I mean, can you really hate a show that blesses us with this?
Yes, in fact, this picture infuriates me, Toxic.
Jesus, didn't I tell you to go fuck off somewhere else, man?
Yes, you did. And I'm glad, because I made a friend. This is Hobo Sack. My name's Randall.
Hello, Randall.
And he lives here now. I've decided you can't change that. Lick my balls.
Sock guy, my house isn't some kind of sock rehabilitation center. You can't just...
Where's the bathroom? It doesn't matter. Just pick a spot and go, bro.
Is he pissing?
Oh, my God. Toxic. Are you seeing this? This dude is maintaining a double stream. And it's still going. It's not stopping. Go. All right. Go.
Back to you, PMJ.
Go.
Goddamn cum sucks pissing all over my video. Thanks for covering for me though, Toxic, while I tried to unalive myself. This show was, of course, very important to keeping Mario sane. But of course, that show and all of the other Mario TV series were honestly terrifying to Miyamoto. The images these shows created are undeniably terrible for the brand, and Miyamoto was seriously starting to consider stepping in and steering the brand himself. But at this point, Mario was on a roll and would move right on to the next project. The Super Mario Bros. Movie would be one of Mario's biggest outlets ever for his stress. This movie warrants its own entire discussion, so we'll just go through the weirdest things it did real quick. This is Yoshi, this is a Goomba, this is Bowser, and this is the writer's room.
Dudes, we should make Luigi mildly fuckable.
It's just a nonsensical direction to take Mario in, and looks completely out of place next to anything else in the series. This was during the initial video game movie boom, where people just assumed since books could be adapted into movies, video games would be just as easy. But then the moment they saw the plot of the video game, they realized that it wouldn't work in a movie, and then went...
Alright, we've completely disregarded the source material and written our own movie. Now we just gotta put all the characters' names back in. What was Mario's last name again? Mario.
And we end up with a movie that is related to Mario in name only. And upon seeing the movie, Miyamoto knew that this was it. This was proof that he had to step in. But before Miyamoto could do anything, Mario's insanity would boil over one final time. During the peak of the SNES and Sega Genesis console war, Sega announced the Sega CD add-on for the Sega Genesis, an add-on that would allow CDs to be used for games rather than cartridges, which would allow for much more powerful games to be able to be played on the Genesis and make it capable of displaying high-quality cutscenes. Nintendo saw this, and with the competition being so fierce between the Genesis and the SNES, they knew they had to make the same thing for the SNES if they wanted to keep up with Sega. And they decided to partner partner with the company Philips, so they signed a deal and they were getting ready to start work on it. But shortly before the development of the CD peripheral for the SNES could begin, the Sega CD came out and flopped hard, selling a mere 200,000 units at launch and costing Sega millions, and Nintendo decided to back out of the CD add-on to avoid Sega's failure. But they had already signed that contract with Philips, and in the contract it said that Philips had the right to make a couple of games with Nintendo characters in them. They were obviously intended to release with the SNES peripheral, but if that peripheral wasn't going to release, those games had to go somewhere. So Philips took advantage and would create their own system, the Philips CDI. So while Nintendo was able to back out of the CD add-on and not lose a whole bunch of money to it, they still had to let Philips make games for the Philips CDI. And this led to the creation of Zelda CDI and Hotel Mario. Mario, seeing that Philips had essentially scammed their way into letting these games get made, would completely let loose. This wasn't on a Nintendo console after all, so what harm could it do? And this game was a true disaster. Mario undeniably went too far this time. This game was universally hated and permanently warped Mario's perception forever. While the full extent wasn't known at the time, the images that this game produced would go on to haunt Mario and Nintendo for decades, maybe centuries. After this was released, who could possibly argue that Mario was in his right mind running this brand? Miyamoto now had the perfect ammo he needed to be able to stop Mario from letting anything like this happen ever again. The gameplay on the Philips CDI was so clunky, nowhere near the quality the Nintendo consoles would allow you to achieve. Why not avoid other consoles for now, Mario? These fully voiced cutscenes were never anything but embarrassments to Mario and the other characters, since both the lines and the deliveries were horrible. So, if we're to avoid embarrassment, it would be best to avoid speaking, right, Mario? And most notably, the art style is repulsive, which would never do if Mario was to become the mascot he was meant to be. So let's make sure we always look presentable, Mario. It honestly wasn't that bad at the start, because Miyamoto knew that if he immediately took everything away from Mario, he would probably fight back against the changes. So it started in sensible ways.
Circumcision?
No, they stopped all of the weird spin-offs on PC and other consoles, so there couldn't be any incidents Dad couldn't oversee. But that just made sense at the end of the day. You don't want other people profiting off of your hard work. So, Mario understood why he couldn't hang out in the PC neighborhood anymore, even if he did miss it to some extent. But the rest of the N64 era did allow him to be himself generally, and plenty of weird Mario games and toys would still be released. But because of the limitations of the N64, it kind of forced the art style to start to become more standard, which was exactly what Miyamoto wanted. The Game Boy Color did allow him to look unique in other games, but when the N64 came around, it became the catalyst for being able to standardize the Mario art style. You'll notice every N64 Mario looks very similar compared to the NES and SNES's wildly different sprites for Mario with every game. This is because the N64 could only handle a very limited number of polygons on a character model. So Mario was only able to look so different with each game. In fact, since art styles couldn't really be that unique at all, many Mario models would end up being reused across multiple games to save development time.
Like God, but with penises. Why do they all look the same?
So by the time we got to the GameCube generation, since Mario style had always been the same, it was really easy for Miyamoto to make it stay the same. So while there were a couple Mario models that looked a little different, most of them all looked like, well, Mario. And the game that would solidify this was Super Mario Sunshine. Mario was still allowed to be a little weird at this point, so there were some parts of Mario Sunshine that were odd. For example, it marked the last time Mario was allowed to roll up his sleeves. This was of course too sexy, and he would never be allowed to do this again. However, more notably, Super Mario Sunshine would be the only Mario game to take place entirely in one location, which you think would warrant some special treatment.
Bikini Mario.
No, you'd expect them to go for some unique art style to match the beach theme. But outside of some of the particular particle effects, it looks just like every other Mario game. Mario had lost all power over the art style at this point, and it would only get more and more standardized from here on out. However, Mario was still able to ignore this problem since he was still able to be entertained by other parts of the game. Because by far, the weirdest aspect of Super Mario Sunshine was the voice acting.
Mario! How dare you disturb my family vacation?
They brought in a full voice cast of people who had not had any major voice acting roles before and made them voice for one of the biggest video games of all time. And the one professional voice actor they had, Charles Martinet, may he rest in peace, didn't have any words beyond wahoo. So we were left with tons of shitty performances for incredibly basic lines. It really shouldn't have been that hard to get people to deliver these lines normally, but somehow they all come off as annoying and bad. In fact, it was so bad, this would mark the end of full voice acting for Mario games. This was the exact leverage Miyamoto needed to cut off voice acting for good and make Mario roll down his sleeves. And this left Mario with less ways to express himself and was now imprisoned within his sleeves. Mario was still able to express himself a bit through the rest of the GameCube era. There was, of course, the ultra edgy Mario Strikers that is completely out of place next to any other sports game. But after the GameCube, the weird spin-offs really would stop. And the final time Mario was allowed to express himself was Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix. DDRMM is a game that was famous for finally letting Bowser hit it. There were a couple other spin-offs after this that you could argue were kind of weird, but nothing that compares to the early Mario spin-offs like this does. It's a basic DDR game, but it just replaces all of the dancing models with Mario Party models, which leads to the animations often looking completely fucked up. It looked like me hitting a backflip. It absolutely flopped as well, selling less than 500,000 copies. And while Mario was finally able to do something new like he really wanted, this was a part of Miyamoto's plan. Sure, Mario got to have fun, but look at how hard it flopped. Look at how terrible these ideas perform, Mario. How can it ever be okay to do something like this again? And because of that, Miyamoto was able to get him to make the game that would completely lock him into the chamber of being a perfect mascot. New Super Mario Bros. The true downfall of Mario's ability to express himself. The art style got completely standardized in this game. The design of Mario and everyone and everything that is in his games would look the same from here on out. The gameplay would start to be forced into the perfect formula for maximum mass market appeal, with any new ideas being simple one-off level gimmicks. This art style and this gameplay was what worked every time and formed the consistency that a mascot needs. And it worked too well, selling over 30 million copies. Twice. This was absolute proof that what Mario could do under Miyamoto's direction was simply superior. Some unique ideas were tried with the Galaxy games, but that took a lot of work, and their sales paled in comparison to the new Soup games, which took way less time to make. And because of that, things continued down the exact path Miyamoto paved. Everything molded into the perfect form for the perfect mascot. Mario would still have a couple holdouts during the Wii era. The previously mentioned Galaxy games, of course, and Mario Strikers would get one more installment that was allowed to get even more edgy, but the series quickly stopped receiving entries. But there was one major holdout. The Mario RPGs. Both the Paper Mario and the Mario & Luigi series still starred incredibly unique stories and characters at this point, creating some of the most unique pieces of Mario media ever. And Mario was seemingly protecting these specifically with his life. These became the final holdout for him enjoying life, since they were the easiest to defend. The point of an RPG is generally to tell fantastic stories with unique characters, so taking that away from an RPG would be pretty dumb. I've deliberately ignored the Mario RPGs up to this point, if you haven't noticed. So let's quickly start from the beginning. Mario RPGs were always unique. They had full narratives and tons of unique characters, even for the world of Mario. From the start of these games, when Super Mario RPG was released, it was immediately proven that these games had so much potential. An adventurous story with unique characters and compelling situations, and this was all done with the limitations of the SNES. It was so beloved and influential, it spawned an entire movement of people pushing for one of the game's characters, Geno, to get put into Smash.
Geno for Smash will be head of the field in July 2020. Gino for Smash. July 2020.
This game was unfortunately made by Squaresoft, who became disinterested in Nintendo and began developing for PlayStation instead. So Mario couldn't hang out with the characters created for that game, but he would quickly fill the void by creating not one, but 2 Mario RPG series. Every other Mario spin-off has been pretty separate from the others. There's only one racing spin-off series, only one series for each sport, only one Fortune Street spin-off, but there were technically 3 Mario RPG series, and 2 of them were running concurrently. And both of those series had 3 amazing games in a row, and both would gain intense cult followings around them. These games became cornerstones of weird Nintendo fans' personalities.
Yeah, come on, don't call us a cult. We're just a group of people who all agree Boffle is incredibly fuckable.
They were amazing games that made the Mario world really feel alive, giving Goombas and Koopas personalities and political opinions. And after 6 amazing games in the span of a decade, fans were clamoring for the next Mario RPG. And because of all this, the RPGs would be the final games to avoid the normalization. But as we entered into the 3DS and Wii U era, Miyamoto would resolve to complete his mission. The next Mario RPG to be released was going to be Paper Mario Sticker Star. Miyamoto needed to make sure this game was normal, but he didn't have the same authority over the RPGs that he had over the platformers and spin-offs, since they were contracted off to completely separate studios, being Intelligent Systems and Alpha Dream. However, he still had a way in. The Paper Mario games were being produced by a Nintendo employee, Kensuke Tanabe. This would be the man Miyamoto needed to convince to normalize the Mario RPG series as well. Even though he was a Nintendo employee, it would be no easy task, since he had worked on the previous Paper Mario games and was surely attached to the stories they had told with the last 3. So Miyamoto readied himself for an intense fight. Then he strolled into Kensuke's office to convince him to make the Paper Mario series completely bland. Now listen here, you son of a— Oh hey, Miyamoto. We were just about to start writing the story for the next Paper Mario game. You got any ideas? Don't. Okay, sounds good. Thanks a bunch. My genius is unmatched. Miyamoto's grand scheme had worked beautifully. Paper Mario Sticker Star became as bland as the first word in the title may suggest. Any interesting characters were replaced with identical Toads. There were no more unique enemies, and the plot went from world-ending or even multiverse-ending stakes against an unstoppable villain to Bowser kidnapping Peach. The gameplay took a hit too, being simplified to an incredible degree. Many of the options you previously had in combat were taken away, as well as outside of combat, since things like experience and equipable items were removed. Because any type of progression system was clearly too complicated for Mario's simple brand. And it looked perfect to Miyamoto. But what he didn't know was that this game would be his greatest mistake. He had pretty handily gotten away with all of the other changes he had made Mario make, since they were all so subtle, people didn't feel them, other than Mario himself, of course. But Sticker Star was a complete 180 from what was previously expected from the Mario RPG games. And while Mario and Luigi Dream Team would release a few months later and would be much closer to what people expected from Mario RPGs, it would not be enough to stop people from starting to notice what was going on. This was a wake-up call for every weird Mario fan. Any and all uniqueness and complexity was instantly ripped away from this series, and the scheme of steadily taking it away from the other games all suddenly became so clear. This instantly caused many people to become angry and dissatisfied toward not Miyamoto, but Mario. Mario, being the most forward-facing man of the series, was naturally the victim of the backlash. He was bullied for being out of ideas, playing it safe, and not understanding his game's own appeal. But while the Sticker Star backlash was powerful, Miyamoto would soon find out that was nothing but stage dressing. It was the opening act to the true performance that would come just weeks later, when New Super Mario Bros. U released. Sticker Star really only made it clear to the Mario RPG fans what had been happening, but New Super Mario Bros. U was the moment every fan realized what had been happening to Mario. It was the 4th New Super Mario Bros. Game to have been released in a 6-year time span. 4 games that looked controlled and were structured nearly identically that weren't called Call of Duty releasing in such a short amount of time. It was inevitable that fans would notice. Despite the fact that all of these were good games at the end of the day, fans were unhappy with the games because of how standard they had become. And thus, the games created a lot of angry fans, and nothing was safe from their hatred. Anything associated with this series of games became hated just for existing. The Koopalings became the most hated Mario characters because they had been in almost every one of these games and they always had such lame boss fights. This entire plastic art style started to become hated as well. And the idea of Nintendo even releasing 2D platformers started to receive hate, with some of the best 2D platformers we've ever seen from Nintendo releasing to an eye roll because of Mario. And of course, the man who received all this hate was the Jumpman himself. I mean, who else were they going to hate? They had no clue what was going on behind the scenes. So Mario was the only man left to blame. This wasn't necessarily anything new for Mario. He had received hate in the past. Naturally, not every game he was in was received amazingly, but he had never been so far removed from any way to relieve stress. He was now so deep in this mascot machine. What was he supposed to do? The closest he could do that would be considered outside the box was play sports with the Blue Hedgehog, who, to be fair, was having his own weird renaissance at the time, but that would never work as well as changing all of the enemies in your game to Japanese late-night radio hosts. Mario started to officially deteriorate, and with no other choice, just began to move on to the next game. And this was just the beginning of the fans' rage, since now that the fans had noticed how standard the 2D games had become, they were finally able to notice what had been happening to all the Mario games. The Mario sports games had become nothing more than bland sports simulators with a couple of power-ups. Mario Party no longer had unique and original characters like MC Ballyhoo. And they started removing all of the more adversarial aspects of Mario Party, replacing them with friendlier and teamwork-based aspects. And Mario Kart fucking cut Waluigi from the roster. The fans were disgusted by these things, but the big problem for the fans was yet to come. It would be what would happen to the most beloved group of Mario games: the 3D platformers. Super Mario 3D World E3 2013 was the most underwhelming trailer Nintendo ever released. At first glance, it's seemingly just a below-average first trailer for a game that would leave people saying, I hope we get to see more of this game. But after the backlash that followed New Super Mario Bros. U, fans were primed for outrage. This wasn't Super Mario Galaxy 3, it wasn't a return to the sandbox gameplay of 64 and Sunshine or something else new or creative. It was a sequel to Super Mario 3D Land, the incredibly basic 3DS Mario game that is essentially the 3D version of New Super Mario Bros. 3D Land was already kind of a disappointment, but it was clearly more of a tech demo meant to show off how the 3D function of the 3DS could assist in platforming, and it just so happened to get expanded into a full game. Thus, fans understood why this existed and just enjoyed the pretty good platforming game that they had. But seeing this gameplay style again on Nintendo's big home console, clearly intended to be the main 3D Mario experience on the console for millions of people, meant that this wasn't a tech demo. This is what Nintendo wanted 3D Mario to be. They want everything to feel like New Super Mario Bros. In fact, they want everything to be New Super Mario Bros. Before you know it, every last Mario game will be a New Super Mario Bros. Game. Each and every Mario game will play exactly the same, slowly replacing all interesting ideas with grassy plain stages and replacing every character with a Koopaling. And before you know it, everyone will be Koopalings. Oh, shit. Yet again, all of the people's hatred would be directed towards Mario. Mario knew the people didn't know any better. Anytime there's a controversy with anything, the most forward-facing member of the organization is the one who takes the brunt of the criticism. But it didn't mean it didn't hurt, and with no way to let out his emotions, he just had to suffer. More and more games would be released, and they would all be high-quality games, but they were still all plagued by how normal they were. Mario trapped in the endless cycle of smiling and waving. Smash Bros. Would come around, and in that game he would at least be allowed to frown, but it wasn't enough. Mario needed to make something change, and he would have to take a bit of a risk to convince his dad that maybe the weird isn't so bad. Super Mario Maker would release and would still keep things normal in almost every aspect. The only games offered were the most standard Mario games, and the items that were on offer were very limited, and only featured standard Mario enemies and items, and then some stuff to help enable creativity with level building. On the surface, they didn't really take any risks with this game, other than the game concept itself being a little out there, but I think most people would consider a Mario level editor to not be a risk. However, hidden within the game, Mario would still, for the first time in years, get to do something weird. When you played in the original Super Mario Bros. Gameplay style, every so often when you hit a question block with a super mushroom inside it, there is a very small chance that the mushroom looks like this. And if Mario eats that, he becomes skinny. This is a very rare occurrence though, but this isn't the only way to get it. If you successfully beat every single level that was featured in the Nintendo World Championships 2015 featuring Aaron Egoraptor Gangrams Hansen, you can unlock this weird mushroom permanently to use in the Super Mario Bros. Gameplay style. And this was the test. If nothing went wrong, then this could prove that Weird Mario wasn't all bad. And when people found out about this weird mushroom, to Miyamoto's shock and awe, nothing bad happened. People liked the power-up, and the game still performed very well. This was obviously one small thing that they added to a game that was already really likely to perform well, so this doesn't really prove a whole lot, but it was a start, and meant a lot to Mario. Miyamoto's Gambit had failed spectacularly, and now Miyamoto was trapped in the corner. How could this have failed? Look how lanky and disgusting he looks. He would have to make a move now if he was going to stop Mario from going back to this. Something had to be done. And so, Miyamoto went completely on the offensive. It would start immediately with Mario Tennis Ultra Smash. There would be nothing interesting allowed in this game. No interesting power-ups or unique systems, only macrophilia. Mario & Luigi Paper Jam was a crossover between both Mario RPG series, and in a genius move, Miyamoto would be able to make both RPG series seem bland and uninteresting at once. Then, only months later, Mario and Sonic at the Rio Olympic Games would release as yet another standard Mario sports game. But to rub salt in the wound, Sonic would be allowed to add old and obscure characters to the game, while the Mario side would add a couple of standard characters and Koopalings. And Paper Mario Color Splash would release to double down on both Sticker Star and Paper Jam's design philosophies. All of these weren't enough though, since only Wii U and 3DS owners were able to see it. Which, while the 3DS sold okay, the Wii U did what it did.
Fuck all.
So only so many people could get this perfect Mario that Miyamoto had created. So he would need something that could get Mario to everyone. And he knew just the thing. The only item nearly every person in the video game playing world had access to. A mobile cell phone. Super Mario Run would release in late 2016 for iOS and early 2017 for Android. This was it, Miyamoto's magnum opus of blandness. Using the new Super Mario Bros. Art style with nothing but basic enemies and obstacles. The only new things to this game are the things that needed to be made for it to be an endless runner, and in order to have an effective mobile game storefront. But other than that, Miyamoto got exactly what he wanted. The bland, yet appealing art style, and the simple, yet satisfying gameplay sent out to the masses. And he got 300 million people to download this mobile Mario game and understand that Mario is this now. This is what he is, and this is what he always will be. All parts of his grand master plan, working in perfect tandem with one another, would finally prove that this is what Mario was meant to be. And as the game was sent out and all of the downloads started rolling in, his grand master plan turned around and fucked Miyamoto in the face. It wasn't expressly how bland it was that caused it to be a failure. However, it was a contributing factor. The real problem was that it had the worst monetization system ever for a mobile game. When you first start downloading Super Mario Run, it is presented as a free-to-play game. You have a handful of levels that you can play, and they're each mildly entertaining, exactly as you'd expect a mobile game to be. But then, after the 4th level, the game stops and gives you a pop-up. In order to get the full game of Super Mario Run, you had to pay $10. That's a high price for an auto-runner mobile game. And it's positioned in such an awkward spot with no warning, so most people weren't aware of the paywall until they reached it. This makes it feel like a scam. And even if this terrible paywall didn't stop you, there's nothing that interesting behind the paywall. It's just new Super Mario Bros. But on your phone, and with less control over Mario. So, if you have a new Super Mario Bros. Game, just go play that instead. And while there definitely were people who had this app but didn't have access to the new Super Mario Bros. Games, those aren't the die-hard fans who are willing to pay $10 for a mobile Mario game. So they put down the game after the free levels. The people that you have to impress enough to buy the full game are the people that are already big fans of Mario and new Super Mario Bros. Isn't the way to impress them. You do that with Rosalina Rule 34. And since they didn't have that, almost nobody bought the full game. It made $60 million according to this, which is low for anything Mario, and this had the biggest install base Nintendo could ever dream of. And they somehow managed to lose to fucking Clash Royale and its Skeleton King with toenails. The disappointment around Mario Run was immense, and Mario yet again had to take every part of it. The criticisms now reaching a new peak, the voices from all around him growing louder and louder. And as more disappointing games released, it became clear all of this pent-up angst had to release. And so, Mario picked up a firearm and he shot Rabbids. Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. This game makes no fucking sense. Mario is in a gameplay style he has never been in before. He's hanging out with the Rabbids, a very polarizing group of characters, often being referred to as the minions of gaming. And of course, he has a gun. There is no other Mario game anything like this game. Sure, most of the stuff that is truly unique about this game comes from the Rabbids, but the fact that he is even standing next to such a weird character outside of Smash Bros. Is something we hadn't seen since the Wii. And the game itself was received incredibly. The new tactics gameplay was amazing, and the new interactions that could be had between Mario characters and Rabbids were so refreshing for the series. But it's clear, this game still played it safe in plenty of areas, and that's because of Shiggy McGee. Despite his utter defeat, Miyamoto was still kicking, and still daddy, and he wasn't ready to completely give up his hold on the series. Sure, he had less power now because Mario was the one with the gun, but he still had some sway over Mario. And when Mario was planning on doing a crossover, he was able to nudge him in the direction of something perhaps a little cringe, but still keeping it safe with Mario himself. You think Mario crossing over with the Rabbids was an accident? No, this was what Shiggy McGee wanted. People just needed to realize once again the lows Mario could reach when he's being so wild, and a game with the Rabbids would surely show off all of the problems. And yet... people loved the game, and it sold amazingly, and Miyamoto was left with almost nothing, but he had one more idea, one more chance to regain control. And this time, the knockoff minions wouldn't be enough. He would need something even more annoying. Miyamoto went back into the shadows to exact his plan. But with him gone, the bars were now, without question, lifted. And Mario was prepared for the sweetest release. Super Mario Odyssey was the most creative and nonsensical thing to happen to Mario in years. Every location is unique and filled to the brim with wacky ideas, and not only are there many unique new character designs, there's also a ton of new designs for Mario himself, with him wearing all kinds of different costumes. And while there are just simple palette swaps like he normally gets for costumes, there's also tons of never-before-seen outfits, from cultural appropriation to kinky and even all the way to actual crimes. But it would not stop there. In order to take full advantage of his newfound freedom, he was allowed to look however he wanted, thanks to captures. He took any and every form he could, except for the dragon. Why can't we be the dragon? This is bad game design. But this jump was huge. Previously, the biggest transformation he had gotten since Mario Galaxy was fucking Spring Mario, and now he can be meat. And this game was received amazingly, and immediately shot up to one of the best-selling Mario games of all time. And as the Switch continued, it just got better. Mario Tennis Aces would be the first Mario sports game to feel like a Mario sports game in a long time. Mario and other characters would get interesting new costumes, there was a whole new system for the gameplay, and MatPat made a video calculating Luigi's cock size. Why wasn't I making YouTube videos back then, man? They were remaking some of the old Mario and Luigi RPGs, and they weren't going in order either. They were specifically picking the two most beloved entries in the series, known for their unique stories. Super Mario Maker 2 would implement some of the old unique ideas, including a Super Mario Bros. 2 power-up, a game that they were avoiding like the plague in the first Mario Maker.
Not worth it.
They made a game collection dedicated entirely to the unique 3D Mario games, and a Mario Battle Royale. Some games would get missed by this new chain reaction and would remain pretty standard, but hey, you can't expect everything to be perfect right out the gate. Many of these releases were still pretty understandable as well, since these games had more specific things fans wanted from them. There were still some disappointments, but they got sparser and sparser, and for every slight disappointment, something like the return of Mario Strikers would happen. But this wasn't perfect. Sure, Mario was taking way more risks than he used to, but he was definitely still being held back in many ways. The art style was still the same, and Mario still wasn't allowed to talk. But that was honestly fine, seeing as all of the original problems that the weird era caused were due to weird art styles and voice acting. However, Mario still wanted to try it out again, and Miyamoto knew just the solution. Playing into Mario's wants, once again, this would be Miyamoto's final stand against Mario. It was time to make a Super Mario Brothers movie. A truly terrible idea. How do you make a Mario movie? It's already been proven to be a terrible idea. Sure, the Mario RPGs would tell interesting stories in the Mario world, but that's not what people expect from a Mario movie. A Mario movie would have to encapsulate the feeling of the platformer games to be able to achieve the mass appeal that an animated movie would have to achieve to be a success. And at this point in time, people have the perception that Mario doesn't talk. And now Mario would have to speak for an hour and a half. On top of that, it would be developed by Illumination, the creators of the very thing the Rabbids get compared to, the Minions, who are potentially the most hated animated characters of all time. Fans were dreading this, and Miyamoto knew he had the perfect product to take everything away from Mario again, and he just kept stacking on the terrible aspects of this movie. They revealed the voice cast, and it was filled with seemingly random big celebrities, not people who could truly do the characters justice. And while they did get Charles Martinet, may he rest in peace.
Sorry, I gotta kill the spider.
To be in the movie, he was only gonna have a couple cameos. How could they possibly consider sidelining one of the most important men in Mario history? Next, the art style would be revealed, and it was almost an uncanny valley. The characters all looked wrong compared to the characters we were used to. It was a mess, and Miyamoto was satisfied with himself. He made the shittiest movie to bring an end to Mario's foolish excursion throughout the Switch era. Yet again, Miyamoto was utterly defeated. Mario had somehow found a way to make the movie work. The plot was simple, yet compelling. Most of the voice actors did genuinely care and gave their all. And the art style, while looking off, allowed for beautiful locations and animations. It was good, and there was nothing Miyamoto could do about it. And later that very year, to prove it once and for all that this is what Mario should be, Super Mario Bros. Wonder released. The art style, the enemies, and every other part of the game were wholly and completely unique. Not a hint of new Super Mario Bros. In sight. It was finally a weird Mario game. Mario is himself again. He is no longer confined to the new soup bland prison. Everything is finally right for Mario and will continue to be for years. And just in the past few months, it's been clear that things are just getting better. They remade the most acclaimed Paper Mario game, The 1,000-Year Door, a game loved for its story. A story that is so different to any other Mario game, featuring unique characters, dark concepts, and just some nice and pure nonsense. And they just announced a brand new Mario and Luigi with a unique and beautiful art style. And I'm sure we'll see tons of new games just like these on the next Nintendo console and beyond. We'll surely see even more dead Mario series revived. Tons of new things are now possible with the brand in general, and Mario might even scare kids again.
You know what, man? You're all right.
Miyamoto was left defeated. And while he has been the villain of the story, ultimately, he helped Mario, undeniably. He was able to teach Mario where being weird can go wrong. And with this new era, while Mario has been getting weirder, nothing has come close to the horrors he created in his early days. Thanks to the harsh measures his father put on him, he truly did improve as a person. Miyamoto, while causing a lot of problems for Mario, still taught him valuable lessons like a good father should. And while this doesn't make him a good father, it's still important to recognize his importance in getting Mario to where he is today. Now, there is a more pessimistic outlook on this whole story. Some may say this tragic tale is in reality just a tale of corporate greed. This is just Mario trying to make the most money possible by trying to adapt to what the general public seems to want. And these really normal games were just him and Nintendo misjudging what was best for the character. And if at any point the market wants more basic Mario, then more basic Mario is what we'll get. However, I say we just take a look at Mario himself. People can't help but paint exactly how they're feeling directly on their face. And while sometimes people will attempt to present emotions that they aren't feeling, those fake expressions will never compare to the real thing. And when we take a look at Mario, I ask you to examine for yourself which smile looks more genuine to you.
I'm just about as happy as I could be with the state of Mario right now. Almost every new game is unique in some amazing way. And while we don't have everything we wanted, it'll be a good few years before Bowser puts on the Super Crown officially, it's hard to argue Mario games have ever been as fun as they are now. But that does bring us to the end of our tale. And thank you for sticking through to the end of it. And hey, if you think this video deserved it, why not leave a like? And if you liked that weird purple triangle that appeared partway through the video and had a sock hiss for 20 seconds straight, you can find his channel in the description. As for me, I'll be making up for the few things Mario is still missing from his early days. I'll be seeing you at your local park.